Hold up. Wait a minute.
This is Carla Renata, aka the Curvy Critic, and I shoot straight from the hip.
Yeah, you know I'm always shooting straight from the hip.
Let's take a trip around the curve. Hey, let me take these glasses off. It's like major glare. Some major glare going on. Hi everybody, it's your girl Carla Renata, aka the Curvy Film Critic, and I am back. I am sorry that I am a full 24 hours late, but I promise you I have a really good excuse. I was in New York doing a bunch of junkets and watching Deadpool, which I can talk about socially right now, but I'm not going to do a review. But so that's what I was doing. But today we're going to get into Twisters. We're going to get into Widow Clicquot. We're going to get into, where is it? Without a Net, the Cirque de Soleil documentary that is dropping on Amazon Prime. And we're going to talk about this young lady. So in the middle, that is Lakpa Sherpa, and that is her director on your far right, Lucy Walker. And I interviewed her to talk to her about their documentary Mountain Queen, which is now streaming on Netflix. But before I get into all of that, do me a favor. Click the bell for notifications if you are on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. You never know who you're going to see here, because next week I got some real nice, juicy surprises for you. All right. So let's get right. Oh, and I wanted to talk about this documentary too. So let's get right on into it. There is a documentary that is streaming on Netflix right now called Skywalkers, A Love Story. And I talked to y'all about this before. It was on, it was at Sundance, and it was called Skywalkers, A Love Story. And it's directed by Jeff Zimbalist. And it's written and directed by him, and co-written by Maria Buconia. But what I want to tell you is that this was a documentary about the life of Angela Nicolau and Vanya Burkus, who were two 20-something Russian social media influencers. And they gained a massive following thanks to a viral trend known as rooftopping. So what that is that they climb up buildings that are currently in construction. They go all the way up to the top, and they literally, like, she's changing clothes and they're posing up there and doing all kinds of stuff. They have a drone that they would share all their drop all their footage on, and then another drone that would roll around and shoot them. Because I'm like, who is shooting this? Because the shots were fantastic, but they had this drone that was following them around, and that's how they were getting their footage. And not to mention that them climbing these buildings, it was illegally, and they decided that they were going to climb the building that was the highest building in the world, and it was still under the construction. And they show during the documentary how they almost get caught, how they're almost arrested. It's a whole situation, but it's really quite stellar filmmaking from a documentary standpoint. But I had PTSD watching it, and I know that Angela had a little PTSD during the filming because she had an injury in her wrist, and she's, balancing on top of Vanya to do these poses. So imagine you've got a wrist injury, and instead of concentrating on your focus and your balance with these poses, you're concentrating on how much your wrist is hurting. And if you fall, like, there's no net, there's nothing to catch you, nothing to catch you. So I'm sure she had a little PTSD after her injury. And this story will have you holding your breath. It'll have your shoulders hunched, but it'll have you rooting for these two to have a happy ending like they want. It's beautifully done, and I had a great time watching it. Again, it's called Skywalkers, A Love Story, and it is streaming on Netflix. Speaking of Without a Net, Cirque du Soleil Without a Net is now streaming. Well, not now streaming, but it will be streaming on Prime Video on July 25th. It is directed by one of my favorite documentarians. Y'all have heard me talk about this woman on this podcast numerous times. Her name is Dawn Porter, and it is dealing with Cirque du Soleil after it moved its reboot flagship production, the one that's dealing with the water. They're doing all the tricks and trapeze tricks over the water. They moved it more than a year after the pandemic, and it shows how both the performers and the crew members, excuse me, face an uncertainty as they work to return their world-class standards in time for the reopening night in Las Vegas. Now, if you are not familiar with Dawn Porter. Dawn Porter is the director behind another really great documentary called John Lewis, Good Trouble, Trapped Among a Few. And she also did one about the Supreme Court justices. She is a badass, for lack of a better word. But she captures the dramatic personal highs and lows of the performers, of the crew members, and has been given unprecedented access for the world's biggest circus act in their journey on the way back from the brink, and the brink meaning the pandemic, because March 2020, as we all know, shut everything down. They had 44 shows around the globe, Cirque du Soleil shows around the globe. They went from having 44 shows around the globe to zero. Imagine how many employees, it's over like 3,400 employees all the way around. And then you have to furlough some of these people. And then the longer the pandemic went on, the longer, some of these people were going to have to be furloughed and or cut back altogether. And then when they came back, they didn't get everybody back. So there's that. But I really was intrigued about this particular documentary because two of my castmates from Lion King Los Angeles are in Cirque du Soleil in Vegas. I'm not sure if they're in O or what shows they're doing, but one of the girls who was the understudy to Rafiki is one of the vocalists for Cirque du Soleil, and one of our dancers, he hires all the dancers for the Cirque du Soleil company. So I was really interested to see the behind the scenes. You learn about how they get these shows together, how they keep them moving, how these performers keep their bodies tight, how they keep their skills tight. One girl had, the ring, I'll show you again, the ring that you see there. One girl had that ring attached, like it looked like a stripper pole, but it was a pole with that ring attached to the top that went on an axis on a spiral. And she was just in her living room practicing her routine every day so that when they came back, she would be ready. It's fascinating and intriguing, these stories about a beloved and wildly popular live theater franchise. And I can't express enough, a live theater franchise. It's not made for TV. So if you've never seen a Cirque du Soleil show, and you definitely haven't seen O, or you haven't seen any of them, there's 44 productions around the globe. You have your pick. But when Without a Net Cirque du Soleil hits Prime Video on July 25th, check it out. You will be very, very surprised. I promise you, and you'll enjoy it so, so much. Widow Clicquot. Now, you know that Veuve Clicquot champagne that everybody loves to drink, the one with the orange label? Well, it was invented and curated by this woman. Her name, well, not her name, but she is she is portrayed by Haley Bennett, and Tom Sturridge plays her husband. And it's the story behind the Veuve Clicquot champagne family, a business that began in the late 18th century. Let me tell you something. The best thing about this film, and it's, you can only catch it in theaters. The best thing about it is that you find out again just how disrespectful and disregarded women were during that time, because when her husband died due to a mental illness, they were like, yeah, so you can't own the business unless your husband signs for you. And yes, so your husband's dead, so if you want to continue this business, you have to have another man co-sign. So she needed another man to co-sign a business that she co-homed with her husband who was dead. Make it make sense. I'm just saying, make it make sense. Anywho, it tells her whole story about how they started the wine together. You learn, if you're a wine connoisseur, you learn a lot about how wine is stored, the process of wine from the grape to the glass. It is a compelling, bold story about a woman who has been hidden from history. Because before this film, I did not know that a woman was responsible for one of my favorite champagnes. And champagne is my favorite drink of choice. I love champagne. It doesn't give me a headache and it doesn't make me drunk. And I only drink like maybe 2, maybe 3 glasses of it, but it doesn't make me drunk. I don't feel it at all. And I love that particular champagne. It's one of my favorites, that and Moet. But it's again, it speaks highly to the respect or the lack of respect that women had during this time. And it also blasts the ignorance of how people deal with mental illness during that time, because mental illness was kind of just brushed off to the side, and people weren't really, they weren't really checking for you if there was anything about you that screamed you were not quite on top of it. So yeah, I highly suggest seeing this if you have not seen it. Again, it's called Widow Clicquot, and it is a story behind the Veuve Clicquot champagne family and business that began in the late 18th century. All right, before I get into Twisters, let me talk about this woman right here, Mountain Queen, the Summits of Lakpa Sherpa. This film was also at Sundance this year, and it was the second runner-up for the Audience Award. Lakpa, who is the woman in the middle, she is the first Nepali woman to completely summit, not once, but nearly 7 or 8 times, descending Mount Everest. And if y'all know anything, you know Mount Everest is no joke. Like, I've climbed some mountains and I've climbed some rocks, but I would never climb Mount Everest because people have gone up there and died because of the elements, because of the altitude, because it burns your skin, it burns your lungs. Like, you have to be in the utmost physical condition to be able to make that climb. And Lakpa has done it more than anybody else, any other woman in the world. And she is from Nepal. She's funny, she's smart, she's fiercely determined, she's no nonsense. And she is an inspiration not only for women but for anybody who has been through domestic abuse, because domestic abuse survivors again get brushed under the rug. People are like, oh, it'll get better, come back. And some of these people can't come back because the person that they're being abused by killed them. That part. Lakba is very open, very honest, and very, hard on the sleeve about her experience and snatching her 2 daughters and running away to keep all 3 of them safe. It is exquisitely shot. Lucy Walker does a great job capturing the essence of Lakba, capturing the essence of her life, capturing her journey. And like I say to her in this interview that you're about to watch, that I came away from it, I was extremely moved and extremely inspired and excited after I saw it, but I would not have felt that way if Lucy had not conveyed the story that she did. So take a look and a listen to this interview I did with Lucy Walker about Lakpa Sherpa, the Mountain Queen of the Summit. First and foremost, let me just congratulate you on what you have won for this film already. It won an People's Choice Award at TIFF for 3rd place, I believe. And so I wanted to congratulate you on that and on the film in general, because it's beautifully and wonderfully done. But I really kind of just need to know how you go from children's programming with Blue's Clues to Mount Everest. I just need to know. I just need to know how that happens.
Oh, well, thank you for noticing. I directed 20 episodes of Blue's Clues, seasons 2 through 5. And it was a pretty fun show because it was a mixture of live action and animation. So it's quite technically demanding. And the funny thing making a documentary is like that too, because it's like, it's quite like, it's not just filmmaking, there's some other like technical considerations as well. And it was a fantastically fun and great learning experience. And I look back and I'm like, thank you, Blue's Clues, because otherwise I do not know how, it's tough, it's I think about that with Lakpa's story as well, because Lakpa's an incredible mountain climber, but it's really expensive to climb Mount Everest, and it's really difficult to get a movie career going, right? Especially when you're like a woman with no connections, and it's really tough to kind of get a career off the ground. And had it not been for getting that job going, I don't know how I could ever have honestly had the career that I have now.
What a wonderful journey that's been for you. Congratulations and snaps and claps for that. That sounds wonderful. When you were talking about Mount Everest, I did want to ask you this question because it stuck out to me when I saw the film. Those scenes with that big silver ladder where it's across and then going up, how do you shoot something like that? Because is it a one-off? Do you do it numerous times? Like, I can't imagine she had to keep climbing over and up that ladder.
How the climbers have devised a system to get across is by lashing these ladders, and boy, is it precarious and terrifying. But actually, there are a lot of them. I mean, that climb takes like, you leave at 2 a.m. and you're lucky if you get in there before nightfall the following day, right? It's a giantly long climb to get through there, and there's actually a lot of ladders. So what was really rad, and I don't think it's been done before, was we trained the Sherpas, so LACPA's own team. We gave them cameras and really trained them in what kind of shots we thought would be really good in the editing room and would be good in the movie. And it really empowered them and encouraged them to get their own points of view on things, and what do they see when they are up there on the mountain. And it's also something I'm really thrilled about with this one, is that this is not a story about like Sherpas helping the Western tourists. The superstars in this movie are Sherpa. It's LACPA and her like relatives, basically. She's
Right.
of relatives who are helping, her Sherpas, because Sherpa is a word that means both a last name of the people, the Sherpa people. It's also the name for this
Everybody's last name is Sherpa. Yeah.
exactly. And it's also the kind of word that is used for like climbing guide. You talk about like a Sherpa is like the climbing guide who carries everything. And typically, the tragedy of history is that most often, history is focused on the Western guy, who summits and hasn't seen the Sherpa that's not only summiting with them, but often like carrying their stuff at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was really nice to sort of recenter that frame and put, LACPA Sherpa herself as the superstar, and also to give cameras to the Sherpa people and say, hey, what do you see when you're up there?
You know what Ayers Rock is?
Yeah, of course.
I climbed Ayers Rock in Australia before they shut it down. I was 10 minutes from the top before I popped my calf muscle. And then I had to slide all the way down. It was either that or wait for somebody to airlift me up out of there.
Wow. Hats off to you. And I hope the calf is recovered.
It was never the same, because that the calf muscle is such a large muscle that when I popped it, I was able to rehab it back to some semblance. But I was a dancer, so I could never really go fully up on releve again like I could before I popped it. Like, I can go up on releve, but I can't stay up there for very long.
Pulled my knee up this February, and I'm like, I'm never going to be the same. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you already know.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
girl,
right.
we can sit here and we can give war stories about our knees and hips and calves all day long. But I enjoyed this conversation with you, and I really enjoyed the film. It swelled my heart. You know how in the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, it talks about how his heart swelled 10 times or something to that effect. That's what my heart felt like after I watched this. So thank you.
No, thank LACPA. I mean, we're just doing it for her, right? It's sort of her world, and I just get to
Yeah,
get.
but you captured it. And if you hadn't captured it the way that you had, I wouldn't have the feeling that I have. You're right. I was very inspired and moved by her life and her story and her words and her presence. But you had to capture that in order for me to feel that way.
And you had to feel that way, I think, in order for her to want to do what she did. And my job is just to connect you with her. You know what I mean? That's
Girl,
what
just say thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Lucy.
Cool. What a joy. Thanks.
I love talking to Lucy. She's so freaking humble. She was like, oh, no, I can't take the credit. Yes, you can take the credit, because you did that, Miss Lucy Walker. You guys, please check out Mountain Queen, The Summits of Lakpa Sherpa. It is streaming on Netflix right now. Let me reiterate what I talked about. Widow Clicquot is in theaters right now. Check that out. Coming to Prime Video on July 25th is the documentary Cirque de Soleil Without a Net, directed by my good girlfriend, Dawn Porter. And check out Skywalkers, a love story that is streaming on Netflix. and I'm going to let you guys know about something that I did. I was so excited. So I went to New York. I did a couple of junkets, but one of the things that I did when I was there was I saw this movie. Yes, I saw Deadpool and Wolverine, honey, and you are not ready for what is about to come your way. But I'm not going to get into that now. But what I will say is that Ryan Reynolds, this dude right here, he outdid himself on this one at the world premiere, Deadpool and Wolverine. Okay, and we're going to talk about that next week. We're going to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine. We're also going to talk about Dee Dee. I have the entire cast, including that young man, Isaac, right there. We're going to talk about that film. We're going to talk to Isaac, the director, Sean, and the young woman who plays his mother, Joan Chen. We're going to talk to M. Night Shyamalan, who has a new film coming out called Trap. It is coming to theaters on August 9th, and I'll be talking about that in the next coming weeks. I'll also be talking about a film that I saw at Sundance called Rob P, starring one of my favorite. I have a little crushy crush on him. Chiwetel Ejiofor. This is based on a true story. I'll tell you more about that later. There's also another documentary called War Game. I'll be talking about that. And I'll also be talking about Elizabeth Taylor, The Lost Taste. But before I get up out of here, you came here to hear me talk about Twisters. So let me talk about Twisters. Twisters it was billed as a sequel to the original Twister, right? It's not a sequel to the original Twister. It's not in any shape, form, or fashion a sequel to the original Twister. It is a brand new story where they have taken elements of Twisters and they've taken elements of that film and used them to make this story. So in the original film, which starred the late Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt and Philip Seymour Hoffman, they got together as storm chasers to chase down these storms. Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt's character had a little romance going on, and Philip Seymour Hoffman was one of the storm chaser crew. And Jamie Gertz played Bill Paxton's girlfriend, fiance. So in the original, there was a love triangle between two women and a man. In this one, there's a love triangle between two men and a woman. The other thing that's happening is they show Dorothy. Dorothy is now in her 5th incarnation. So we see Dorothy, and that was kind of fun to see the Dorothy on the thing. We have Anthony Ramos, who everybody will know from his role in Hamilton, but he's done so much more since then. He's been in Transformers. He's been in so many other. The first time I met him, I interviewed him at the Toronto International Film Festival for a film called Monsters and Men with John David Washington, and it was their first big film together. But he's done so much, and in this one, he plays a scientist. I love that they had him be a scientist that was smart, a scientist that wasn't defined by his ethnicity. They didn't lean into any stereotypes with his ethnicity in that film, which I really kind of loved. And the other thing that is different from this version is that there's Glenn Powell is in it. So Glenn Powell is having a moment. Like, the boy is just having a moment. He is in everything, everywhere. He's in everything, everywhere, all at once. Like, literally, he's got like 5. I think he has maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 films that have come out this year alone. Y'all remember him from Top Gun Maverick. I interviewed him for a film called Devotion a little while ago with Jonathan Majors. He also had a film on Netflix that is streaming right now. He's got a lot of movies out. He seems to be in that lane of like the young Robert Redford, the young Tom Cruise, the really handsome dude with the really massive acting chops. His acting chops are great here too, but I'm fearing that he's starting to fall into a pattern, and I need for him to hop out of that pattern before Hollywood typecasting, because he's really quite gifted, and I don't want his looks to derail his acting possibilities. That's all I want to say about that. Daisy Edgar Jones, who we know from a variety of things, is the female in this, and she has PTSD because, like Helen Hunt's character in the first movie, she was in a storm where it took all of her friends away. And Helen Hunt's, and in both situations, they were both in the storm, and in both situations, they both survived. Twisters is an adrenaline, high octane film. The the storm sequences are everything. The storm sequences are great. It's when we get to the story part of it that it's like when they start acting, you're like, okay. But then when they get back into like the storm and the storm chasing and the storm's coming down and swooping everybody up, you're like, oh, you're really invested. So I'm kind of half and half on this one, but I love it, and it's invigorating the summer box office already. It has made millions and billions of dollars, and it's gonna do really well until Deadpool versus Wolverine comes out. Then it might slide down a little bit, but that is it. But it stars Glenn Powell, Daisy Edgar Jones, and Anthony Ramos. And Twisters is in theaters right now. It is a Universal Pictures film in tandem with Warner Brothers. If you have not seen it, please do yourselves and get to a movie theater and check it out. All right. And I usually do my Around the Curve, but y'all, I have been so busy running and gunning that I ain't had time to do it. So come back to me next week when I start talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. Dee Dee, the cast of Dee Dee. I'll be talking about Rob Peace, and I'll be talking about Elizabeth Taylor, The Lost Tapes. All of that on the next Curvy Film Critic with Carla Renata next week. I cannot wait to see y'all. I'm going to run and go grab me some dinner. I hope you have a beautiful evening too. And I'll put some clips up of the interviews that we're going to do next week so that you can check them out and see what's going on. Okay. So again, if you haven't joined me before, I'm Carla Renata, your host of the Curvy Film Critic with Carla Renata. I do film reviews and interviews with people above and below the line in the film industry. Give me a big thumbs up if you are on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications if you are on YouTube. If you're watching this via Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, what's up, y'all? Glad you stopped by, and I will catch y'all on the flip side. And yeah, have a beautiful week, and deuces.
Hold up.